Everyone, welcome. Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. So resolutions to action, how to create meaningful change. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à notre webinaire des résolutions pour un changement à l'action. On est très content de vous avoir parmi nous aujourd'hui. Before we start, I would like to mention that we have a live interpretation that is available today for French and English. So if you wish to do that, you can go on the Zoom bar at the bottom of your screen, click on interpretation to choose the language of your choice, English or French. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à notre webinaire. Sachez que nous avons aujourd'hui la traduction qui est disponible en direct. Donc vous pouvez choisir en dessous dans le menu du Zoom, il y a une petite icône avec une planète interprétation. Vous allez pouvoir choisir l'option du français ou de l'anglais. Sans plus tarder, on va pouvoir commencer. Next slide, please. We can get started. So before we start, the Climate Reality Project Canada's office is located in Chotake, Montreal, which is located on land that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe Nation. Therefore, at the Climate Reality Project Canada, we honor, recognize, and respect that these nations are the traditional stewards of the land and water on which we are on today. So I will invite everyone to present themselves in the chat. You can introduce yourself as well as add where you are joining us from today. Without further ado, we can get started, and I will let our host for today, Jamie, take it away.
Thank you, Margot. So hi, everybody. Happy New Year. My name is Jamie Latvedis. I'm the Regional Engagement Coordinator for Climate Reality Project in Canada. So today we asked, what if in 2022 we took action? Not an easy question, given how vast and complex climate change is. Knowing how to take our first steps is quite complex. So to help us visualize those first steps, and also to mark the launch of the Campaigning 101 guide, we presented a special webinar. Now, before we start, it's important to note that this webinar is made for pretty much anybody, whether you're an engaged student, if you're a climate reality leader, if you're part of a hub, or if you're just curious and want to listen. As long as you're curious to take action, you're in the right place. Now, that being said, the way this webinar is set up is that we'll have concrete tips and examples of how to launch a campaign. And in addition to that, we'll also point you guys towards a source of funding. So we're really going to give you guys everything you need to properly launch a campaign. And the way that's going to work is we're going to have our national campaign manager, Margot, tell us about the guide. Then we're going to have a case study, a presentation on the case study from Emory College, this campus core, who, by the way, successfully got their president to sign up for the Race to Zero Emissions and to declare a climate emergency. So hats off to you guys. And lastly, Guy is going to tell us about the funding opportunity. So that being said, that's how we're going to work. And the first one to present is going to be Margot. That's going to tell us about the Campaigning 101 guide. Without further ado, Margot, take it away.
Thank you, Jamie. Next slide, please. I will be talking about our Campaigning 101 step-by-step guide for action. I'm very happy to be presenting the work of our team. The whole Climate Reality Project worked on it, and I will do my best to summarize in 10 minutes the juice of it. To get started first, to know about what campaigns are really about creating change. So they're defined as long-term efforts toward a desired outcome. They can transcend borders and they work. But first, you need to establish a campaign with a set target, an audience, set goals, and help ensure that you bring your desired change. So some examples of campaigns can be starting a community garden, so very much locally, but we've also been hearing in the climate movement much about divestment, and for example, the case study that we will be presenting today of getting your university to move toward more climate action. So without further ado, I'll start with the 5 keys to success to get us started. So first, the one is everyone is an activist mindset. The idea is that there are no barriers to being an activist, whether your age, where you come from. Everyone can stand for something and act, whether small or big, toward change. The second key to success to successful campaigns is to have internal champions. There's a tendency to want to gather as many people as possible, but finding those few champions that have the dedication, the time, the capacity to really take it on, it only starts with a few people. The third key to success is a clear focus with a dynamic strategy. So having a clear focus is having, for example, specific goal and a strategy. But when it comes to campaigning and life in general, things don't always go according to plan. And so the idea is to be flexible and to use problem-solving abilities to adapt when something doesn't go according to plan, and when opportunities arise to really have the capacity to take on those opportunities as they show up. And finally, for the number 4 and number 5, we have build a compassionate movement and care for yourself. And I'm happy to announce today that about the care for yourself, we have a new webinar coming, organized by the Climate Reality Project on January 26th at 7 p.m. So I encourage you to stay updated, whether with social media or your climate reality leaders, to know more about this upcoming project. Next slide, please. I will then be going a little bit more in detail in those 6 steps that we dive into in this guide that we have just published. So step 1 is to get started, set up your topic, your timing, and your objectives. It's important to take the time to do that because this is essentially how it starts. And so the more specific you can be and not taking on too much and being realistic in your goals is very important. You will be also able to develop, for example, key results that you want your campaign to achieve, and that can be that can mean different things. That can be quantitative. For example, you want to start a petition and you want X number of signatures, or it can be qualitative as, for example, if I'm thinking of a local in your neighborhood, you want to start your community garden, then that would mean I just want to raise awareness about this project. Step 2 is to identify opportunities for change. Who and what do we want to target to create change? In this step, it's important to familiarize yourself with the concept that surrounds your issue. And that means looking into, for example, what are the existing groups that are already working on it? What already exists, so that either you can join or support them, learn from them, and then eventually go on your own if that's needed. And if you go on your own, then who do you need to go to for change to happen? This isn't always as clear, or we think it's clear, but it's really about having points of contact to know where the change can happen. Step number 3 is developing 2 to 3 calls to action that volunteers can easily mobilize around. We provide examples of calls to action that can be undertaken in a campaign, and I know that the case study of Emory's College right after will also help with that step. And step number 4 is deciding on platforms to spread your message. When we talk about platform, we can think about social media, but it can also be existing groups, networks, whether they're informal or formal association that you can reach out to. Think about alumni groups, your neighborhood groups, political groups, and all of those really that are ways to reach out to people, especially in the virtual world now that we live in. These are extremely important to tap on. And then step number 5, we have develop a social media campaign to spread the word with hashtag and social media toolkit that volunteers can use. It's hard to avoid social media today. So we really wanted to include in this tool for everyone to use. If you don't know how to get started, what are the few elements that you need to really just start, and very easily actionable steps. And finally, with step 6, it's the evaluation of the campaign, developing and implement tracking measure. At the end of a campaign, it's time to debrief, to adjust for a possible step. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have achieved your goal, but it means you've taken steps. So whether it was a time frame of a summer or a year, the evaluation is important to gather everyone that was involved and see how it can be made better, and look basically at the successes, the challenges, and the lessons that were learned. Next slide, please. we have also included in this guide, oh, sorry, I don't see the next slide yet, but it's the toolbox. So with the guide that goes through the different steps, we have toolbox with tools for every single step. So there are a bit of exercises. I know that doesn't sound like fun, but it is, that help kind of structure your reflection for every single step. For example, in step 2, we talked about identifying opportunities for change, and you'll find the exercise of a stakeholder map. So you build a visual representation of who is on your side, who you need to convince, and how they're connected in your network. In the evaluation phase that I just talked about on step 6, we have a tool that helps you with identifying with the people that were involved, your successes, your challenges, and the lesson learned. So it's a bit of structuring of your campaign that can help you. And that's it for my section. So I really encourage everyone to go check it out. It's live on our website now. And I hope it will inspire and get as many campaigns started as possible as we all start this new year with wanting more climate mobilization.
Thank you, Margot. And I forgot to say, if you guys have questions, you can leave them in a chat on Zoom, or you can leave them on Facebook as well. They'll be translated here on Zoom, so I'll ask the questions live. So in the guide, there'll also be very concrete examples of campaigns that have been launched. One of those examples is the Campus Core examples. So Campus Core were started in the States, but since 2020, they're now pretty popular in Canada as well. And the whole point of the Campus Cores is to encourage students to take action on the campuses, pretty explicit. But yeah, so they're going to go for divestment, they're going to go for pushing lobbying, administrations, and stuff like that. And the whole point is to encourage students to organize amongst themselves. And one great example of that is the Emory College Campus Core. And we're really happy to have Claire and Aaron today that are among us. They're going to tell us about how they successfully launched their campaign. So they're going to tell us about that. And once more, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat or again on Facebook. And there we go. So Aaron and Claire, up to you guys.
Hi everyone, so my name is Claire. I'm the chapter chair for the Campus Core of the Emory Climate Reality Project. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here today. And then I also wanted to preface this by saying that Aaron and I are not campaigning experts by any means, but we did achieve some success at Emory. And so we're more than happy to share what worked for us on our campus. So on our slides that we're presenting, I've sort of like marked down in the corner what steps in the campaigning guide that it pertains to. So our campaign really started last spring with the formation of the Emory Climate Coalition, and that is a network between us and 2 other climate-oriented groups at Emory. So the Emory Climate Organization and the Emory Climate Analysis and Solutions team. And the key to the success of our campaign was really this coalition building that we engaged in, because this allowed us to demonstrate broad student support for our campaign and also lent us a lot of credibility and let us build up some visibility. So when we were deciding on our objectives, we noticed that Emory markets itself as a sustainability leader. However, it doesn't take as urgent of measures to tackle climate change as it could. So there's sort of a disconnect there. For instance, Emory has never made an explicit statement acknowledging the severity of the climate crisis, and its goal is to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, which is way too far in the future to avoid climate change's worst impacts. And so also when we were starting out our campaign, we made sure to consider the context of Emory and run a campaign that would actually be successful. So in framing our campaign, we took an approach, we sort of put a positive spin on things. We approached the administration by saying, we really recognize and appreciate all of the current sustainability efforts you're taking. And because of this, we believe you can do even more. And we also knew what not to ask for. So we knew that Emory had just invested in a lot of solar panels, so they might not respond as well if we push them for even more renewable energy investments at that moment. And the guide also talks about choosing the right moment to launch a campaign. So we chose to launch it on Earth Day, which is a time when environmental organizations are getting more attention on campus. So for the specific objectives of our campaign, I'll get into them a little bit. The diagram at the top right outlines the ideal timeline of our campaign that we presented to our University Senate Committee on the Environment when we were asking for their support last semester. So we have three broad overarching themes of our campaign. We were asking for climate urgency, accountability, and transparency. But in this presentation, we're focusing on specific goals that we had last semester. So just logistically, we wanted to meet with our university administration because this was a way to ensure that our demands were really being heard by the appropriate decision makers. And we wanted to bring to that meeting these specific demands. So we were asking the administration to declare a climate emergency by signing on to the Race to Zero and the Climate Leadership Network. And so these are basically two networks of institutions that are committed to climate action. And the Climate Leadership Network is specifically for American universities, and it requires that members maintain a regularly updated climate action plan of how they're going to achieve net zero emissions, and then transparently report on their progress toward achieving that plan. So just overall, these were initial ways to advance our three broad themes. And I also wanted to note that it might seem sort of inconsequential possibly that we were just asking Emory to recognize climate change as an emergency and sign a couple of documents, but we were hoping that this would be a gateway campaign into bigger demands in the future. So next slide, please. So to initially spread our message, we used the following tools. Erin will talk about social media on the next slide. We made use of our student-run newspaper, the Emory Wheel, and published a couple of op-ed pieces in it. So that was a way to get the word out about our campaign, and we got some good attention through that way. We also tabled a lot. So we would set up a table at student events and speak directly with students. And this was a great way to spread our message by word of mouth and recruit a lot of new members. And then we also met with influential university entities. So like I mentioned, we met with our university senate. We also met with some student governing bodies like the Student Government Association, and we worked with them to pass a resolution in support of our campaign. So all of that is to say, it's important to know the channels of influence in the landscape where you're running the campaign and how you can use them to spread your message. So now I'll turn it over to Erin.
Yes, I'm Erin. I am vice chair of the Emory Campus Corps, and I'm going to be going over kind of the rest of our campaign in line with the guide that was published. So moving on to kind of the call to action and actually implementing what we had planned. We did have a virtual strike on Earth Day, and we did get a response from the president's team, but it was kind of minimal and a bit reductive and basically putting off we will speak to you later about the campaign. So we wanted to amp things up a little bit, and we were planning an in-person climate strike once we were back on campus and COVID was not so much of an issue at that time. And to get into that climate strike, we were really focusing on social media and this very intense marketing campaign. So for starters, we had this guerrilla chalking, and that's what we called it. But basically, people would go and chalk at nighttime. So then when people were walking to their classes the next day, they would see the chalk all over campus, and it garnered a lot of attention. We also had connected to this chalking an Instagram account that was at Emory0924 because the strike itself was on September 24th. And the idea was they could go to that account, and that account was kind of building hype over time and revealing more and more information to encourage people to go to the strike. And we were really trying to position it as this very cool, fun thing. We also were very focused on trying to gear our social media content towards the audience, which is why you have this meme in the middle with "Is the climate plan smart?" and the pictures AOC at the Met Gala. And that's just very that's the kind of stuff that college students like these days. So that was the direction we went. And that was tons of fun too, to develop those media marketing materials. We also kind of feel like we could have been better at the time about creating more easily accessible calls to action, just because beyond attending the strike and also helping with marketing and joining our individual organizations, we didn't have as concrete a way for people to continually be involved with this specific campaign. So that's something we're really focusing on now moving forward, is giving people who want to be involved an opportunity to be involved. And a few days before the strike, we think mostly because of the chalking, because it was so apparent, the president actually did email us and agreed to meet with us. And so we were excited for the strike as a way to demonstrate that that student interest was really there, that it wasn't just a small group of people. You can go to the next slide. And ultimately, that is what happened, which was really exciting. We had about 120 attendees at our strike. We had speakers, sign making, and then we ultimately marched from like a central point on campus to the quad where the administration building is. And the good thing about locating on a central spot on campus was that people were forced to kind of engage, to go anywhere. They had to see us and they had to notice what was happening. And that was very cool as a way to get people who may not have heard about it through the marketing also involved. We also tried to get the speeches on a wide variety of subjects because Emory students have so many different interests. So we had speeches on biodiversity and human health and social justice and all of the different aspects of climate change. And a lot of them were very motivating and very touching. And since Emory as a campus didn't have a lot of strikes and activism, it was really exciting to see all of this be very effective, and people were very moved, which was very cool to see. And then ultimately at the bottom right, that is our meeting with our president that followed, and he did agree to sign onto both of the agreements, which was very exciting. Go to the next slide. And now we're kind of in the moving forward stage. So Race to Zero and the Climate Leadership Network kind of inherently have their own benchmarks. And moving forward, we are trying to encourage Emory to meet those benchmarks in very proactive ways. So that's been involved. This has been a big part of like our own step 6 evaluation is we had a meeting with our Office of Sustainability and we found that implementation was a pretty complicated process. So now we're kind of not backtracking, but we are reframing some of our demands in new wording to encourage explicitly more resources dedicated towards sustainability and climate action, so that this is more than just something that was signed on paper, that it can be really implemented in years to come, and that Emory can continue to be effective and continue to be held accountable. And the last thing that was again emphasized in the guide, and we also wanted to emphasize, was that after all of this, we did end up taking a couple weeks off during winter break because we're all busy students as it is. So we were a bit burnt out, and now we're back and we're ready to continue working. And that taking a break is so important and was so important. And that's kind of where we're at now with our campaign. Thank you guys so much for listening to us today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, awesome presentation indeed. Yeah, that whole presentation just made me happy, honestly. So I don't see questions right now, but I have one for you guys actually. So you guys had unsatisfying responses from the president at first, right? He sort of brushed you guys aside. That's the kind of thing that could usually discourage certain campaigns, but not you guys. So could you tell us about how you dealt with that?
Yeah, it was definitely extremely frustrating at first because we had worked really hard to launch our campaign and plan this virtual climate rally during COVID, which is even more of a challenge. But just we continued to maintain energy and positivity because in fall 2021, we all like returned to campus in person, and that like sort of allowed us to regain a lot of momentum. Just like being back in person with peers is really powerful. And we knew how important advancing climate action is at Emory. So that also inspired us to keep up the fight. So it definitely is frustrating at times, but also like being part of a coalition of other passionate individuals is inspiring.
Yeah, beautiful. And you guys also, like, the presentation was so complete that it actually included self-care as well. Could you guys say a bit more on that topic? I know it's really important, and from my own experience, it's actually proven to be quite a tool in campaign mobilizations. So yeah, how important is self-care in your guys' campaign?
I think so. Naturally, people that become campaign leaders in the sense, we were all also very involved in other things on campus. And so I think a big part of self-care as the campaign is ongoing is also knowing that you have that support behind you, so that if you have something else going on, you can like go to the group and be like, I don't think I can handle this responsibility. Can someone help me, or can someone take over for me? So I think that that emphasis on asking for help when the campaign is ongoing, and then ultimately, yeah, taking your breaks where they come and allowing yourself to decompress. And climate change is obviously an issue that affects pretty much everybody all the time, but also letting yourself enjoy and think about other things sometimes is also extremely helpful, so that you can, when you do your work, you can be as present as possible.
Yeah, right on. There's a question from Catherine Gray, who says, can you talk about commitments to funding for climate initiatives? So beyond declaring climate emergency, what were specific policy responses?
Yeah, so we're sort of working through that now, as Erin mentioned, through our meetings after the signing of the networks we asked our president to join. We've realized that there are a lot of areas where Emory is lacking funding for sustainability and climate initiatives. So some specific things that we're looking for right now is greater institutional resources in terms of staff members being dedicated toward climate action. Because our Office of Sustainability is pretty small. So we'd like to see additional staff members dedicated towards implementing our demands. And we're also really interested in seeing a greater focus on climate in academics, since climate change is such an intersectional issue that touches so many academic areas. We think it's really important for all Emory students to gain that foundation. So we are definitely working through how to actually implement this, but yeah, we're planning to move beyond simply declaring the climate emergency.
Yeah, always important part of building a nice campaign is to look at what's next. After achieving a certain goal, you celebrate for sure, but then you have to look at what could follow. I might have one last question for you guys, or maybe two. So what was a pivotal moment for each of you during your campaign that really sort of marked an important passage from one scale of action to another scale, where you guys actually told yourself we're important and something is actually happening? So what was that moment that proved that you guys were successful?
This is so early on, but we held an like environmental climate justice panel, and it was on Zoom, and it was the first Zoom event I've ever been to that didn't have like an academic motive. Like, it was from academic organizations, but it didn't have like a professor offering extra credit or something that a lot of people intended and were very engaged in. And for me personally, seeing that and seeing people willingly coming to this event and being really interested in engaging in climate justice and really interested in what these people had to say was very inspiring for me in seeing that interest from the student body, because it is easy to I'm an environmental science major, and it's easy to be like, well, only environmental science majors care about this. But in reality, it was a lot of people cared about it, and a lot of people were interested in being involved. So for me, that was very early on a big motivator in taking action and seeing that other people also wanted to take action.
Wow, that's a really interesting answer, Erin. I wouldn't have expected that because that was pretty early. But yeah, that definitely was a really exciting moment. But for me, it came much later. It was probably during our in-person climate strike this past semester. Towards the end of the strike, we all we gathered everyone up and marched to the quad, like chanting climate chants and carrying the cardboard signs we had made earlier in the event, and just looking around at like over 100 of my peers also caring about this issue and wanting to create change was so exciting. And as Erin mentioned during our presentation, Emory doesn't have a lot of strikes occurring on campus, so it was especially impactful to see that. And there was just so much energy and momentum, and yeah, it was really powerful. And I loved realizing that our campaign was just bigger than our organizations and something like campus-wide.
Beautiful. Yeah, marches and strikes really have a way of sparking that sort of flame, eh? Yeah, so last question. Would you guys have one piece of advice for everybody present here today? Maybe people who are hesitant about starting a campaign, you know, and they need an extra nudge. Do you have anything to tell them?
That is a very good question.
Yeah.
I guess the point that Margot brought up earlier, that everyone is an activist, really resonated with me, because I remember like the initial stages of our campaign when we were trying to figure out what we even wanted to ask. And it was really intimidating thinking about starting a campaign, and none of us felt like experts, really had any campaigning experience at all. So as cliche as it sounds, you sort of have to fake it till you make it. You just have to like, if you're really passionate about an issue, like the time to start is now. Just like jump in and start working to create change. And it's okay if you don't have like all of the necessary skills. You can definitely use your resources, ask for help, and learn along the way.
Yeah, kind of in that same vein, because I think if I were in that position, what would really stop me would be being like overwhelmed. And I think that it's okay to start with a smaller issue, and it's okay to start with those kind of low-hanging fruit issues that are more accessible, and then try to use that to build momentum and try to accomplish more over time. Because I am the type of person where when I start something, I want like huge immediate results, and I want to see things changing very quickly, and I want to be super productive. And sometimes you have to start small, especially with such huge issues like these ones, and kind of take it as it comes and reevaluate and just keep marching forward. But yeah, that kind of just start with what is accessible to you and then build off of that. It's okay to not start with the biggest issue present.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so again, guys, thank you so much. You guys said that you weren't specialists in mobilization or campaigning and stuff, but there's a lot of wisdom in what you guys just said and presented. So thanks a lot for being here. Yeah, great job, guys. So yeah, next we'll have Gaia, who's our community engagement manager at the Climate Reality Project Montreal. So after hearing about campaigns and how they work and how they could succeed, we're going to offer you guys an extra little step to nudge you guys in the right direction for 2022, which is a funding opportunity. So that's it. Gaia, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Jamie, and hello, everyone. I am Gaia Febvre, the new Community Engagement Manager, and I am really happy to participate in the launch of this amazing campaign and to meet all of you. And as you can see, in 2022, we want to help you turn your resolution into action. And for that, we have launched the new Climate Reality Leader Project Grant Program. So to better understand the program, I suggest to review the key elements of the program, the application checklist, the eligibility criteria, and some examples of the extraordinary projects conducted by other branches through their grant program. If you have any question during my presentation, do not hesitate to put them in the chat. We will answer them at the end. So next slide, please. So let's start with the key elements of the program. The grant program that come with the campaigning one-on-one and will support 10 climate reality leader projects at $1,000 each. But these grants cannot cover salary, and the application closed on January 17. To evaluate the project, we have the selection committee is made of 2 lead mentors, Judy Feinstein and Erin Klassen, 1 regional organizer, Brenna Walsh, and 2 operation teams member, Emily and me. All the application will hear back by January 20, whether or not they are selected. And finally, if the project below under $1,000, it's okay. This is the maximum admissible among the per stipend. So next slide, please. To help you in the process, we have the application checklist. And so you have the application form, it's online. You have to meet the eligibility criteria and submit before the deadline by January 17. And you have to propose a project plan, so you can follow the 6 steps of the Campaigning 101 toolkit. And for the budget, we propose a template to help you to build your budget. So don't hesitate to use this checklist during your application. The next slide, please. Maybe the most important is the eligibility criteria, and they are classified in 3 categories: essential criteria, key characteristic, and other characteristic. So to qualify, projects must meet all the essential criteria. This means that the project is climate related, education, mitigation or adaptation, led by a Canadian climate reality leader, take place in Canada, and also take place between January 24 and March 17. He has to be not partisan, resilient to COVID, so it can be done virtually, safely, and no profits may ensue. So just to be clear, to be qualified, the project has to meet all essential criteria. So next slide, please. We will give a special attention to the project that create new partnership, foster environmental justice, amplifies the underrepresented voices, increase the number of acts of leadership logged, increase also impact of leadership, mitigation, adaptation, or education, and the project that follow the 6 steps of the campaigning toolkit. Next slide, thank you. And finally, we have some other criteria that may be relevant for the project. Helps recruit participants to leadership corps training, re-engages inactive climate reality leaders, solidifies existing partnerships, helps position the Climate Reality Project Canada as the primary citizen-led climate education facilitator in Canada, exchanges the Climate Reality Project Canada visibility, led by more than 1 climate reality leader, foster collaboration across the region as a legacy, or increases the climate action in remote area. So you can find all this information online in the application form, and don't hesitate to put any question in the chat. We are here for that. Next slide. Oh, I would like to finish with the presentation of a wonderful project conducted by other branches through their grant program. So the first is led by Tasky Dogon and focuses on increases coastal community adaptive capacity and resilience to impact of climate change through mangrove restoration in Papua New Guinea. To give some context, Tasky was connected with John Rainbird for the purpose of delivering this project with an Australian-based climate reality leader collaborator. They have also been introduced to Rachada to share information through the planning and implementation of their similar mangrove restoration project. And another climate reality leader based in Brisbane has offered to contribute blue carbon market engagement materials. So it's a real collaboration with a lot of climate reality leaders. For the sector, we are in climate change adaptation and mitigation, community education, and resilience building. And for the diversity aspect, we are in Papua New Guinea with indigenous coastal communities. I can share the link of the project in the chat after. For the second project, it's an amazing project led by Yuli Luisi, ramping up native beekeeping project for low carbon livelihood in Tonga. And the limit number of bees to pollinate crops creates a food security risk for roots crops that serve as staples. And establishing a bee industry, that means beekeeping and honey producing, is an effective way to combat the impact of climate change as it's related to food security. So it's an amazing combination. And for the WHO, it's a lot of climate leaders invest in the community. For the sector, it's like education and low carbon livelihood. And for the diversity, a lot of women and youth was engaged in the project. So I have finished my presentation. I hope everything was clear, and I hope you will be so excited by this new grant program like I am. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Gaia. We already have 3 questions, so I'll get to them right away. The first one was by Janet, and they say the $1,000 is not to cover salaries, correct?
Yeah,
it was reference
correct.
to, yeah. So stipend is usually used to qualify a fixed regular sum paid as a salary allowance. So they ask, what is the $1,000 meant to be used for? So I guess just examples of what the money could be used for, if not salaries.
Maybe can I ask to Emily to join me on this?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Thank you, Janet, for your question, and thank you, Gaia, for that awesome presentation. So, Janet, if there was maybe a typo made somewhere, we're really talking about a grant here, not a stipend. So if you did see the word stipend, that is definitely my bad. And if you could just flag me like where you saw that word so I can go ahead and fix it. I apologize if that happened. So things that can be covered with the stipend, I have a little list in front of me. For example, we're talking, say, purchasing material, maybe doing some promotion if you have like Facebook ads that you want to take care of, or maybe posters to print out, even maybe traveling costs. I'm thinking off the top of my head, if there's like a tour that you or somebody would want to do, then that's something that we can look into funding, printing, things like that.
Very good examples. I think that covers it pretty well. So a second question says, can projects be national in scale, or can they focus on one community? So I guess, is it okay if they focus on one community instead of being national in scale, or I guess both can work as well? Gaia M, do you guys have an answer?
I think both can work, but I would like to confirm with Emily, but I'm sure it can.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. And last question here, does this project need to support greenhouse gas mitigation, or can it be focused on other environmental factors like conservation? And I'll even add on climate justice as well. So I guess the question is, could it work for conservation, climate justice, or other things outside of greenhouse gas mitigation?
Again, so I would like to confirm with Emily, but I think it can work.
Yeah, absolutely. So as long as the project meets the criteria, and really we're looking at projects that will help tackle climate change. So we're not talking, for example, biodiversity protection, which is a very important environmental issue, but it is not one that we as an organization focus on in terms of our strategic priorities. However, yeah, I mean, if there's a conservation piece to that, but as long as your project deals with climate change, mitigation, adaptation, or education, then it definitely qualifies.
Cool. Thanks, Em. Really good questions still coming up. 2 more questions. I guess it shows a lot of interest, so it's pretty cool to see these. Next question, what free resources are already available through Climate Reality Project that we can use in the project?
I will ask to Emily. I'm sorry, I don't have this answer.
No, it's my pleasure. That's why I'm here. I'm the backup. Yeah, so if you are a climate reality leader, i.e. if you've done a leadership core training with Mr. Gore, you have access to a whole slew of resources that are on the Reality Hub. If ever you have specific resources that you are looking for, there are chances that we have them internally. So you can email info@climatereality.ca, and perhaps someone can please drop that email address into the chat while I continue answering. That could be super helpful. Thank you so much. There was another thing I wanted to add. Oh yes, also if you go to our website, climatereality.ca, we do have a resources section on our website. And therefore, even if you are not a trained climate reality leader, we do have a library of tools that we put at your disposal.
Cool. Thanks, Em. And if I could even add, we also have the network that could help. We have regional engagement coordinators across the country now. So if you need help in like supporting that kind of project, don't feel bad to reach out as well. Another question, are you able to use funding to leverage applications to access additional funds? Very good question.
That's actually a very, very good question. I had never heard of that being done. It's definitely worth looking into. Again, as long as the project meets all of the criteria, I think it's definitely worth putting in a proposal, and the committee will look it over. It is, of course, always a case by case, but if you can make a compelling case for that approach, then we'll be happy to consider it.
Cool, thanks guys. I'll give you an additional 10 little seconds here in case somebody else has the last question, but that would be the end of it. Nothing else? Okay. Cool, well, thanks a lot, Gaia and Em, for the answers and everything. A lot of information just came through, a lot of useful information. And that would, oh, one last question here. I knew it. Can the funds be used for an honorarium? Good question as well. So not as a salary, but to pay somebody like professional help in work with a project. Or a good example here by my for Indigenous elders to be present.
Yes, we did get a green light for that kind of expenditure. So for example, if you're organizing an event and you have some speaker honorariums that would result from that event, then that's something that we can cover.
Beautiful. Very good question again. And can we access this recording later? That answer is yes, yeah. It will be on the website, I imagine? Or on Facebook too, probably, right?
That is a good question for IT. Perhaps IT can answer that question in the chat, and I'll be happy to read that answer out loud.
I can answer it verbally right here. So it'll be on our YouTube within the next following days, likely at the beginning of next week. But right after this, and actually currently right now, this webinar is live on our Facebook, so you can go watch it there anytime, but only in English.
Cool. Thanks, Majen. Okay, I'm just reading another question here. Yeah, so just to add on to that question about using money to ask for extra money, it's a very good comment. The idea of using money to get more money, also known as stacking, is a common tool to get government grants, etc. They sometimes require it or prioritize it. Yeah, so yeah, it's very useful indeed. I know for a lot of projects, it could be a case to prove that we have funding already to give legitimacy to a project. So yeah, for the questions, there's the email. Okay, cool. Again, thanks a lot, guys. Quick on the answers, a lot of cool information there. And so like the entirety of the webinar was to frame people properly, not only give them tools on how to start a campaign, but also to point them towards funding, to make sure that you guys have everything you need to start a campaign if you want to, maybe turn that curiosity into action. And I hope you guys had everything you need, and I hope you got what you were expecting out of the webinar. And that being said, oh, another question, I knew it. Is it possible to receive a copy of the chat? Very good question. Imogen, would you have an answer of that?
I believe we might be able to, but there also might be some personal information that can't be distributed. So I will look into that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna make a slow goodbye once more to make sure if there are any other questions will come up. So yeah, I really hope you guys got everything you needed from the webinar. Again, thank you to everybody that spoke, Gaia, Margot, Claire, Aaron, Emily, really appreciate it. And that would be it. Yeah, thanks everyone. Happy New Year. Yeah, there we go. So Margot, do you want to say something at the end before we leave, or is it good?
I think we're good. Thank you so much, Jamie, for the last words. Thank you for everyone to attend. It was, as you said, very inspiring. So thank you. And these are our closing words.
Thanks, guys.